Many events that led up to the Civil War. They include slavery, states' rights, nullification, Compromise of 1850 and the Georgia Platform, the Dred Scott case, Abraham Lincoln's election in 1860, and the debate over secession of Georgia. One of the biggest issues was slavery. The North wanted to get rid of it, whereas the South, their economy was basically built around slavery. This also led to states' rights. States' rights said that anything not specifically stated in the Constitution could be nullified by the states if it was made by the federal government. The Compromise of 1850 was also important. It stated that California could come in as a free state in return for the Fugitive Slave Act, which said any runaway slaves caught in the North had to be returned to the South. Georgia only agreed to this because the Georgia Platform, which said the North would not assault any more Southern laws. The Dred Scott case was also important. Dred Scott was a slave who went to a free state and came back to the slave state. He argued and eventually sued the state that he should be a free state. However, the only outcome was that slaves were no longer considered citizens and they could not sue. Abraham's Lincoln was probably the biggest event. It eventually led to the Southern secession. During the Civil War, Georgia had a major role. They were trading a lot, but the Union blockade cut off the deep port of Savannah. Then there was the Emancipation Proclamation, which said that all slaves in states that are not rebelling were allowed to stay slaves. The Battle of Chickamauga was a major victory for the South. However, General Braxton Bragg's army did not pursue the North, which allowed them to regroup and come and win the Battle of Chattanooga. Eventually, this led to Sherman's Atlanta campaign, in which he burned a lot of cities, including Atlanta. He also marched down to the coastline to Savannah, called Sherman's March to the Sea. However, he left Savannah standing and gave it as a present to Abraham Lincoln. Finally was the Army Camp of Andersonville. It held over 13,000 Union soldiers and was one of the biggest camps of war. During the Reconstruction period, 3 laws were passed: the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. The 13th Amendment freed all slaves. The 14th Amendment said that all people born in the USA are citizens. And the 15th Amendment said that all citizens were allowed to vote. There were 3 major Reconstruction plans during the Reconstruction period. One of them was the Lincoln Plan. The biggest thing he said was that 10% of the voting population in the South had to swear an oath to the Union. He was very lenient and wanted to bring the country back together. After he died, Johnson came over. He was kind of the same as Lincoln. However, he said 10% of the total population had to swear an allegiance, so he was loosening up. After that came Congressional Reconstruction. They wanted to punish the South, and they did. After that was Military Reconstruction, in which it was split into 5 military districts, and Georgia was part of the 3rd. There were 2 major groups during this time, the Freedmen's Bureau and the KKK. The Freedmen's Bureau was created to help all freedmen. It gave them food, water, education, and helped them find a job. The KKK was the opposite. They wanted to stop freedmen from exercising their rights. The biggest outcome of the Freedmen's Bureau was that it helped many freedmen and poor whites. It clothed them, gave them food, and gave them a better education. The biggest effect of the KKK was that it intimidated many blacks and it restored Democrats to power in the South. When blacks were allowed to vote, 32 African Americans or black legislators were sent into the Georgia Assembly. However, they were all kicked out due to some stupid reasons, such as unethical practices as a postmaster and being illiterate. This had a major effect because black people did not hold office in Georgia for over 100 years. Finally, during this Reconstruction era, there were 2 major farming techniques. There were sharecropping and tenant farming. Sharecropping said that people did not bring anything. They needed everything, included land, animals, and the tools to farm. Tenant farmers, however, brought their tools and animals. All they needed was the land. Sharecroppers usually ended up in debt and never got out, whereas tenant farmers actually made money. Also, with no more slaves led to a decrease in cotton, which led to the rise in the textile industry. textile became a really, really big product in the South, specifically Georgia.